In a desolate wasteland, Rick is launched across the floor during a fight, seriously fearing for his life. Suddenly, his mentors emerge from the smoke, praising his 2 years of training, assuring him he'll ace the E-rank adventurer exams. While flattered, Rick knows he needs medical attention. Adventurers are usually young due to the physical strain, yet some adults, like Rick, refuse to give up on their dreams. He approaches the reception desk to request his exam ticket, where the receptionist, recognizing him, excitedly reminisces about their past as co-workers. Rick recalls their last meeting 2 years ago when he shocked her by quitting to pursue adventuring, leaving him a bit embarrassed given his age minus 32, an uncommon start for adventurers who usually begin in their teens. Curious about his past 2 years, she learns Rick has been training in the mountains. Just then, a drunken guild member attempts to flirt with her. Ignoring her rejections, Rick intervenes, quickly knocking him out with a light jab to the stomach. The receptionist apologizes for the disturbance, but Rick brushes it off, recalling how he used to be a receptionist himself and questioning why the guild serves alcohol. After receiving his exam number, Rick steps outside to meet Renette, a maid who greets him and asks if he's done with registration. He thanks her, distracted by her assets, which she playfully points out. Attempting to shift the focus, he expresses his excitement for the exam. Meanwhile, inside the guild, other adventurers gawk at the handprint left on the drunkard's dense steel armor, marveling at the strength it must have taken to do that. 2 newcomers recognize the drunkard, Dommel, and a rank adventurer wanted for 30 counts of assault. The receptionist suspects Rick might be overqualified, and during his physical exam, the physician is surprised Rick, at 32, is still testing. They measure his height at 5A, then lead all candidates to the next room to measure their mana with a crystal ball. Most candidates achieve varying results, the highest being C rank. When Rick touches the orb, it barely lights up, resulting in F score. As others mock him, the orb suddenly shatters when the examiner calls for the next candidate. The next test measures offensive abilities, with candidates striking a special slime bag that absorbs impacts. Remembering his training, Rick recalls one mentor insisting he must destroy a golden slime bag, as tough as a dragon's fang, to succeed as an adventurer. Inspired by his mentor's ability to destroy a golden slime bag with a single punch, Rick was determined to train until he could break one himself, even if it meant hitting it 50,000 times a day. As the candidates line up to strike the bag, the next up is the second son of the Darrier family, rumored to possess C-rank magic at just 11 years old. He casts a tiny fireball, surprising everyone, including Rick, who notes that the boy's spell is far less powerful than what his own magic teacher would unleash. As the attack power tests continue, Rick's turn arrives. The examiner, noticing Rick's age, questions whether he should be attempting such tests. Despite feeling judged and tempted to give up, Rick recalls the grueling training that left his knuckles bloodied. Determined, he winds up for his punch, and to everyone's shock, the slime bag splatters and flies through the wall. The young boy, frustrated that Rick stole the spotlight, resolves to outperform him in the next test. When the next challenge begins, Rick impressively tanks a 4th order nature spell, prompting the examiner to compliment his skills. However, the examiner urges him to use a higher tier of defensive magic. Rick admits he only knows 1st order spells, surprising the examiner given his precise mana control. Unwilling to be insulted, the examiner prepares to unleash a 5th order spell, casting a shock cyclone that resonates through the kingdom. Meanwhile, Sylvester arrives at the exam center, bewildered by reports of an F-rank adventurer who destroyed a slime bag and blocked a 5th order spell with basic magic. Meanwhile, Rick confidently tackles the written portion of the exam, reassured by his extensive experience as a receptionist. Afterward, Renette asks about his performance, and Rick expresses confidence in acing the written test, though he worries his overall scores, especially the F in mana, might hinder his chances of passing. Renette reassures him, reminding him of all the training he did to prepare. Moments later, Fried confronts Rick, furious about his success in the tests. Rick, confused, offers to help, but Fried is upset that today was supposed to showcase his skills. As he cries, Rick tries to console him, but Fried's sister, Angelica Dute, arrives and immediately scolds Rick for ruining her brother's day. Fried insists Rick is a 40-year-old man, but Rick protests he's only 30. Eventually, Angelica throws her glove at Rick, unwittingly challenging him to a duel. Not realizing the significance, he picks it up to avoid staining it, unwittingly declaring his intent to fight. Angelica eagerly sets the duel, declaring the loser must serve the winner for life. As a 2nd-class royal knight, Angelica is considered B rank, which terrifies Rick, who has no experience fighting someone of that caliber. Renette encourages him to trust his training, reminding him of the rigorous workouts he endured. Overwhelmed by memories of his grueling training, Rick vomits, but Renette reassures him that if he survived that, he can handle Angelica. Facing Angelica, who boasts her speed earned her the title Lightspeed Angelica, Rick is shocked to find her movements are slower than he expected. He easily dodges her attacks, leading her to believe he got lucky. Frustrated, she accelerates her speed, but Rick still manages to keep up, raising his confidence. However, when she trips on a rock, her unpredictable strikes catch him off guard. Angelica, trying to regain her composure, asserts that she meant to trip and is impressed by Rick's dodging. She then uses a special technique to increase her speed 3-fold, but Rick still finds it manageable. She has limited energy for the technique and goes for a final desperate attack, but once again, she trips. Rick attempts to intercept her with a punch, creating a massive hole in the ground, which terrifies Angelica, making her question his true strength. Rick introduces himself as a former receptionist turned adventurer and is eager to continue, but Angelica surrenders to avoid getting hurt. This unexpected outcome means she now has to serve him for life, a fact she quickly forgets as she runs away in panic. Unfazed by the duel's result, Rick heads back to check his exam results, aware that his mentors are coming to see him, which fills him with dread. At the exam center, candidates' learn results will be announced by their exam tickets glowing blue for those who pass. Rick is anxious about failing, but Ronette reassures him he did well. He appreciates her encouragement, though he jokes that if he were younger, he'd marry her. However, her intimidating side surfaces as she threatens to triple his training if he fails. Suddenly, Rick's ticket glows blue and he's elated to discover he passed the first exam, leaving the hall with Ronette. As Rick steps outside, a dreadful stench fills his nostrils. He sees Raster Diremute, the eldest son of the wealthy Diremute family, approaching Ronette. Rick has dealt with 2 Diremute family members already, but this time, Raster is there to win Ronette's heart. Ignoring Rick, Raster professes his love for Ronette, claiming he wants her to be his second wife. This crosses a line for Rick, who steps in front of Ronette, declaring she's his girlfriend. Raster notices Rick's exam card, realizing he's still F rank, which he finds hilarious. Rick retorts that Raster looks at least 25, but Raster laughs, revealing he passed the exam at 14 and is now an A rank adventurer here as an instructor. Feeling dominant, Raster turns back to Ronette, inviting her to dinner. She promptly declines, stating she only goes with Rick, especially due to the ungodly amount of perfume Raster wears. Enraged, Raster vows to make Rick suffer in the exam, hoping to win Ronette's affection instead. After Raster leaves, Rick is relieved Ronette still clings to him, despite feeling embarrassed about calling her his girlfriend. Ronette assures him it's okay, it made her happy. Meanwhile, Raster seethes with rage, complaining to his siblings, Freed and Angelica, about Rick's humiliating defeat. Freed whines about being insulted, while Angelica laments being bested by the same old man who now has the audacity to make her his servant. As mock battles approach, Rick feels anxious. Ronette advises him to hold back, but Rick is unsure why he should against stronger opponents. He worries about Raster's involvement until they encounter Lynx, who will be in charge of Rick's exam. Overjoyed, Rick celebrates, relieved that Lynx will mentor him instead of Raster. Lynx, also older, praises Rick's determination to switch careers, noting they're similar in age. However, around the corner, Raster lurks, plotting revenge. Later, Rick and Ronette are in the locker room when someone announces that Lynx has mysteriously fallen ill and Raster has been assigned as the new instructor. Panic sets in for Rick as Ronette suspects Raster pulled strings to make this happen, holding a grudge against Rick. Other examinees gossip about Raster's notorious reputation for tormenting F-rank adventurers, heightening Rick's anxiety. Meanwhile, Raster demonstrates his cruelty by knocking out a random examinee with ice blasts. Just as he revels in his power, he receives a message from the elite guard. Inside, Rick paces nervously, unsure how to handle Raster. Ronette reassures him that he just needs to beat Raster, but Rick feels it's impossible against a respected A-rank adventurer. If he backs out, he'll face triple training. Ronette stands in front of him, urging Rick not to doubt his skills. She emphasizes that other people's opinions shouldn't shake his confidence, all that matters is her belief in him. Grateful for her support, Rick feels his confidence returning. Just then, a cloaked boy approaches Rick, offering free fortune telling and assuring him there's nothing shady going on. Despite the suspicious setup, Rick decides to play along. However, as he's about to sit down, Ronette spots a magic circle on the chair and warns him too late. In an instant, Rick is teleported away. The boy removes his cloak, revealing Freed, who smugly revels in having tricked Rick. However, he should have planned better for his own escape because Ronette is furious. She grabs Freed by the collar and with a surge of anger, blows a hole through the wall, demanding to know where Rick has been sent. Freed initially refuses, but after a non-consensual eyelash trim and a threat of eye poking, reluctantly reveals that Rick is only 100 meters away. Meanwhile, Rick finds himself confused by a river behind the training center. Suddenly, the elite guard appears, delivering the unfortunate news that they have orders to beat him up. Realizing this is Raster's doing, Rick sees that they plan to ensure he misses the exam. He accuses them of being shameless, but the guard leader corrects him, explaining this is a coordinated attack involving B and A-rank adventurers. Feeling utterly outmatched, Rick scans his surroundings and notices familiar faces as party members standing on a ledge, frightening him even more than the elite guard. They jump down and ask why he's not at the exam. Fearing for the elite guard, Rick concocts a lie about them helping him train. Braun, one of his party members, offers to join their training, but Rick knows how brutal it can be. He warns the guard leader to back off before things get out of hand, but the leader dismisses his concerns and orders his men to attack Braun. As one guard swings a sword, it shatters against Braun's stone-faced stance. Pleased, Braun commends the guard for strengthening his body but is disappointed with the weapon's inadequacy. Enraged, the guard attempts to use his fists, but Braun simply grabs his hand, squeezing it until it turns purple. He reassures the guard that he has healing magic to restore his mangled hand. The guard leader begins to realize his mistake as the situation escalates. In the midst of the chaos, Mazette offers to handle the situation peacefully. He pulls out a Superfire Barrel MK3 rifle and fires at the elite guards, leaving them limp on the ground. Rick yells at him for killing them when he promised a peaceful resolution, but Mazette insists they're not dead yet. Just then, a guard tries to take Alice hostage, underestimating her. Braun warns him to back off slowly, but the guard doesn't listen and strikes Alice. His fate is sealed as she vaporizes him in an instant. The elite guard members are stunned, while their leader puts the pieces together. He realizes Alice is a prodigy, the world's strongest mage despite her age, and that Braun and Mazette are equally formidable. With all members of Rick's party being S-rank adventurers, the leader decides to retire from the elite guard immediately. As Rick tries to ignore the chaos and focus on his exam, he eventually reunites with Renette, who has dealt with Freed. They find Lynx badly beaten by Raster for daring to have a dream of building a school for his village. Rick's anger boils as he vows to beat Raster's ass for what he did to Lynx. Before the exam, Adolf appears to explain the 4 cores of power in this world: strength, dexterity, magic capacity, and magic control. He has a unique ability to gauge a person's power by sight. Demonstrating this, he scans a random examinee and declares him weak, only for the guy to be swiftly taken out by Raster. When Adolf scans Raster, he feels the strain from the overwhelming power and goes blind when he looks at Rick. In the stands, Rick's former co-worker, Elisa Granger, introduces herself to Renette, having seen Rick with her the day before. Excited to hear about Rick's new friends, Elisa agrees to join them in watching Rick's test, only to be shocked by Braun's presence. Mazette invites Renette to sit next to him, but she declines, knowing his antics. Mazette spots a girl standing behind Renette and asks who she is. Renette introduces her as Elisa, Rick's former co-worker. Elisa greets everyone, and Mazette, noticing Elisa's vibrant personality, eagerly offers her the seat next to him. However, Renette is determined to protect Elisa from Mazette's perverted intentions. As Rick steps into the arena, someone asks Renette how she thinks he'll perform in the exam. Confidently, she declares that Rick will pass without incident. Elisa, however, isn't so sure. She warns that Raster, an A-rank adventurer known for using excessive force against E-rank challengers, poses a serious threat. But Braun reassures everyone that if Raster is just an N rank, Rick shouldn't have any trouble. The fight begins, and Angelica, alongside a badly injured Freed, cheers for Rick to teach him a lesson. Raster expresses his determination, admitting he doesn't know how Rick managed to escape those meant to beat him, but reassures himself that they're nowhere near as strong as he is. When Rick asks Raster why he became an adventurer, Raster coldly responds that he did it for the status, enjoying the ability to beat up rookies without any risk to himself. With a shallow reason like that, Rick vows to never lose to him. Raster starts by firing a level 1 ice spell at Rick, intentionally missing. He mocks Rick for being frozen in fear, but Rick remains still as Renette had advised him to use the first minute of battle to calm himself and observe Raster's movements. Preparing for a real attack, Raster casts a level 3 fire spell. Rick is impressed by the quick incantation but remains focused, refusing to dodge. The fire blast hits him directly, and while Elisa is worried, Rick emerges unharmed. Braun reassures Elisa that Rick is strong enough to withstand such attacks. He explains that the core of power mana capacity must be trained from a young age, otherwise it limits growth. With Rick starting his adventuring career at 30, his mana capacity is low, which is why he worked hard to develop his physical strength through intense training with Braun, which included running between villages with 900 kg ankle weights while being chased by venomous snakes. Mazette helped Rick hone his mana control, and it's surprising he didn't give up halfway, as he typically dislikes hard work. But for Rick, he was determined to build good magical defenses. Braun adds that Renette trained Rick in dexterity, shocking Elisa, who thought Renette was merely a maid. Renette enjoys wearing maid outfits for fun, but Rick put everything he had into learning from his team. As a result, he now possesses the power of an S-rank adventurer, though he doesn't fully realize it since Braun often downplays his abilities by comparing him to E-rank adventurers. As Raster prepares another attack, he insults Rick and Lynx, claiming they're too old for the adventurer business. He then unleashes every elemental attack in his skill tree. When he finishes, he believes Rick must be dead or at least severely injured. To his horror, Rick stands unscathed. Frustrated by Rick's resilience, Raster decides to finish him off with his bare hands. He casts a strengthening spell on himself before charging at Rick. When Raster throws a punch, Rick counters with his own, sending Raster reeling. Renette's advice proves invaluable as Rick has observed Raster closely enough to see the truth. While Raster has a larger mana capacity, he never took the time or effort to truly refine his abilities. In this moment, Rick understands that he is indeed stronger. Raster dismisses Rick's successful counter as a fluke and resolves to get serious, casting a full incantation spell to take Rick out. Despite the impressive display, Rick blocks it effortlessly with one hand and even mocks Raster for his sloppy execution. Elisa is bewildered, questioning how Rick could block such a powerful spell with his low mana capacity. Mazette explains that Rick has mastered great control over his mana use, allowing him to match Raster's spell casting with only a fraction of the energy. Raster's confidence begins to waver as he prepares one last attack to prove he's stronger. But Rick, far too quick, lands a punch that forces Raster to activate his Iron Body defense magic. By now, Raster realizes that Rick possesses more power than the average E-rank adventurer. Still, he clings to the belief that Rick has merely been lucky. However, Rick refuses to fall for Raster's gaslighting. He knows his strength is genuine, and he hasn't even relied on any strengthening magic yet. Realizing he can no longer bluff his way out, Raster asks Rick how he became so strong with so little mana. Feeling insulted by the insinuation that he's using cheap tricks, Rick explains that he was thrown into a dragon's lair and wasn't allowed to leave until he defeated it. He faced powerful explosions repeatedly and swam through a swamp of monster goo until he nearly choked. Elisa is incredulous, unable to believe Rick survived such torture. In truth, Rick didn't survive on his own. Thanks to Proston's healing magic, he was brought back to life time and again after dying. This relentless training pushed him beyond his physical limits. It's surprising he handled it so well, given that no one cared about his safety. If Mazette tossed him off a cliff during training and he died, they'd just call Proston to heal him. The same pattern occurred during Elisa's and Renette's training, leading to multiple life-threatening injuries. Raster, however, doesn't believe a word of it. He questions why Rick would willingly endure such hellish training. Rick responds that he has a dream to one day kill the world's strongest monster, Kaiser Alpide. Raster laughs, dismissing the monster as an old wives' tale, but in truth, it's a very real threat, and the main goal of the Orichalcum party is to eliminate it. Raster calls Rick foolish for believing in a children's story, but Rick is undeterred. His mission is independent of Raster's beliefs. Tired of Rick's stories, Raster declares he will end the fight once and for all. He casts a level 7 binding spell to hold Rick in place, then begins chanting for his strongest spell, the level 8 Idris Elvin Mech. Convinced he has won, Raster believes there's no way Rick can overpower such a powerful spell. As Raster laughs, Rick charges up a level 1 air shot in response. Raster scoffs, asserting that a mere level 1 spell could never compete with his level 8 spell. Yet Rick remains confident, knowing that Raster has only used his spell a handful of times, meaning he hasn't refined it to its fullest potential. In contrast, Rick has unleashed his air shot over 100 million times, mastering its full power. No one believes his claim of using the spell so many times, deeming it impossible within just 2 years. But Braun assures Elisa that Rick speaks the truth, explaining that he needed space-time magic to make it feasible. Despite Braun's reassurance, Raster remains skeptical. He prepares to smash Rick into the ground to finish him off. But in a stunning display, Rick effortlessly snaps the binds on his arms and legs, engaging Raster in combat. Convinced he has finally landed a decisive blow, Raster's confidence is shattered as his mech crumbles under Rick's strength, sending him flying into the stands. Though he's still alive, his pride is deeply wounded. The audience is in disbelief an F-rank adventurer has defeated an A-rank. However, Rick's friends had expected this outcome. After Rick returns to the locker room, they gather to congratulate him, especially Elisa, who is impressed by his newfound strength. Finally understanding his own power, Rick reflects on why he hadn't realized it sooner. He thanks his friends for their rigorous training, but they insist there's no need for such formalities. They propose a celebratory outing at a bar. Just then, Raster and his siblings enter the room. Raster, clearly nursing the pain from Rick's punch, refuses medical treatment. As Rick approaches him, he begins to explain that there's a reason he lost the match today. Raster, annoyed, doesn't want to hear Rick's mockery, but Rick genuinely offers advice. During his training, he limited the number of techniques he used to master them fully. If Raster wishes to grow stronger, he should refine a single technique until he feels he can't go on. He adds that he's hopeful for Raster's future as an adventurer. Raster, for once, displays humility. He silently walks past Rick, promising that when Rick faces his next promotion exam, he'll be strong enough not to lose again. As Raster leaves, Angelica lowers her head, apologizing for the trouble she caused Rick, then helps him out. With the E-rank exams officially concluded, an announcement is made for the candidates who passed. Rick eagerly anticipates hearing his name while his friends prepare a preemptive feast, confident he won't fail. When Rick's name is finally called, he remains surprisingly calm, much to Renette's surprise. He reflects on a childhood moment when he read a story about a hero battling the ultimate monster, Kaiser Alpide, to obtain the Akashic records. Ultimately, that hero failed, leaving the records for future generations of adventurers. This story inspired Rick to become an adventurer. Though his mother had reservations about the dangerous career, she gently urged him to consider a safer path. His father was less supportive, telling Rick to get a real job instead of throwing his life away. One day, after a checkup, his physician congratulates him, revealing that he possesses an innate skill. Rick is astonished, as innate skills are exceedingly rare, reminiscent of the hero Yamato. The doctor cautions, however, that innate skills aren't things that can be awakened through hard work. It will take time before Rick can fully harness his ability. Despite the disappointment of his innate skill not manifesting, Rick remains as cheerful as ever. The following day, he excitedly shares the news of his innate skill with his friends, eagerly anticipating its future activation. However, days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually, Rick must face the harsh reality his innate skill may never appear. His friends are sympathetic, encouraging him to pursue his adventuring dream anyway. After all, many successful adventurers don't possess innate abilities, and the financial rewards can be substantial. Yet Rick's motivation has never been about money. He yearns to become a hero like Yamato. Unable to envision the kind of adventurer he aspired to be, Rick decides to seek a real job. When he breaks the news to his parents, they're overjoyed, thrilled that Rick has finally given up on his dreams for a soul-crushing job like a normal person. The next few years pass with Rick learning the ropes of being a receptionist, watching countless adventurers living out the dream he once held dear. Over time, he grows increasingly jaded, accepting a mediocre life and finding joy in the time spent with friends and family. One day, while rummaging through his old books, he discovers a faded storybook about Yamato's legendary adventures, now a relic of a childhood fantasy. The following day at work, Elisa, who has just been hired, struggles to keep up with the paperwork. Rick steps in to help her, reminding her not to rush the learning process. He also informs her that he's noticed increased monster activity in town, suggesting that a quest to subjugate them is likely imminent. Grateful, Elisa prepares the necessary forms ahead of time. As Elisa leaves to finish her paperwork, Rick's friend Zaid walks in, eager to share exciting news. He has just passed his promotion exam and is now officially a B-rank adventurer. Rick is happy for him, but a pang of jealousy stirs within. Zaid is living the life Rick once dreamed of, and to cope with this jealousy, Rick does what any responsible adult might do. He drinks late into the night. Even in his drunken state, the stark contrast between his life and Zaid's is undeniable. Zaid has ascended to B rank, while Rick has sat in the same chair for 14 years, with nothing to show for it but a stable income and a few annual raises. Just then, Rick hears a commotion in the town square and goes to investigate. What he sees chills him. A mid-rank troll has wandered into the city. Normally, Rick would flee at the sight of such a creature, but when he spots a woman stepping directly into its path, he cannot stand by. He rushes forward to protect her, bracing himself for what seems like certain death. Before the worst can happen, Renette steps in, slicing the troll to pieces with a practiced grace. She thanks Rick for his concern, assuring him that she is more than capable of handling herself as a skilled adventurer. The two introduce themselves, and Rick is immediately impressed by Renette's strength. He assumes she must be a B-rank adventurer, only to be corrected she's not B rank but a rank. He's astonished, as encountering a rank adventurer in town is a rare occurrence. Renette pulls out her S-rank badge, shocking Rick further. S-rank adventurers are so powerful and rare that he's never encountered one before. He recalls rumors that HQ keeps them off local guild registers, overseeing their missions directly. In awe, Rick gathers his thoughts and, feeling bold, asks Renette a strange question. He pleads with her not to laugh at him. Renette reassures him that she hasn't laughed in the 9 years since her 18th birthday. But Rick wonders if that's something to be proud of. He shares his childhood dream of becoming an adventurer and defeating Kaiser Alpide, asking if it's still possible to achieve that dream at 30. Renette observes Rick's courage in trying to protect her and believes he has the heart necessary to become an adventurer. However, she cautions him about the significance of mana reserves. While Rick acknowledges that developing them is challenging after youth, Renette is blunt. It's practically impossible to build mana reserves as an adult. Though Rick anticipates this response, it stings to hear it nonetheless. At least he finds solace in knowing an S-rank adventurer delivered the message. With that, he resolves to give up on his dreams and settle into his ordinary life. But Renette apologizes if her honesty hurt him, but he reassures her it's fine. He expresses appreciation for her candor and, on a lighthearted note, invites her to grab a meal together sometime. To his surprise, Renette instantly accepts, suggesting they meet the following day for their date. The next day, Rick wakes up in an unusually good mood, determined to work harder than ever. When Zaid arrives, boasting about his new B-rank status, Rick surprises himself by feeling no jealousy, genuinely wishing him luck on his next quest. By the end of the day, Rick is practically skipping down the road to meet Renette, hoping their date might blossom into something special. However, his plans take a sudden turn as screams erupt around him. Monsters are attacking. Panic sets in, but Rick assumes Renette is already engaged in battle nearby, so he rushes to find her. As he arrives, he sees her skillfully fighting off hordes of monsters. But with so many approaching, Renette urges Rick to stand back while she handles the situation. He watches in awe as field becomes littered with monster remains, yet Renette seems unfazed, barely breaking a sweat. Suddenly, she freezes, haunted by the memory of her past trauma that brings her to her knees. As Rick tries to reach her, a menacing monster appears just as Renette is overwhelmed. Rick, lacking any means to defend her, feels helpless, but just in time, Zaid leaps in, saving them both. Rick is grateful but confused as to why Zaid is here. Zaid explains that the guild issued an emergency quest to deal with the monster threat, and everyone rushed over to assist. He urges Rick to get Renette to safety while they manage the remaining monsters. As the adventurers engage in battle, Rick grapples with his jealousy toward their strength. Once Renette regains some composure, she warns Rick that it's dangerous for him to stay. He reassures her that the B-rank adventurers can handle it, but Renette's expression grows serious as she warns him of a nearby dragon. Years of unaddressed trauma prevent her from facing it, causing her magic to spiral out of control whenever a dragon is near. Rick is skeptical. How could a dragon appear in a human town? But just then, something enormous flies overhead. He looks up to see the dragon Renette warned him about. Guild recommendations state that any adventurer lower than a rank should simply freeze in place and pray the dragon leaves. Ignoring these rules, a panicking magician attacks, provoking the dragon and leading to devastating consequences for the B-rank team. Zaid quickly shouts for everyone to flee, but they find themselves trapped in a barrier the dragon has conjured. It's clear the dragon intends to leave no survivors. With a sudden surge of determination, Rick strides forward, ready to confront the beast. Zaid shouts for him to stop, insisting there's nothing a receptionist can do against a dragon. But Rick believes that if death is inevitable, he'd rather face it head-on as an adventurer would. Though he thought giving up his dream would bring him peace, the fire inside him still burns fiercely. Picking up a rock, he throws it at the dragon, but it bounces harmlessly off. Nevertheless, his act of bravery inspires the other adventurers, who join him in launching every attack they can muster. They know the odds are against them, yet they fight fiercely. As the dragon retaliates with a powerful blast of fire, Zaid uses his iron body skill to protect the group, allowing them to survive but inflicting considerable damage. Amidst the chaos, Rick rises, determined to make his dreams a reality, no matter the cost. Just then, the dragon attempts to crush him with its foot. On the verge of death, something extraordinary happens. Rick's dormant innate skill awakens, granting him an overwhelming surge of power. Magic radiates from him, visible to all, and he realizes this is the innate skill he had longed for. Now filled with newfound confidence, he confronts the dragon head-on. As the beast unleashes another fiery attack, Rick stretches out his hand, using his magical energy to absorb the flames. When the moment comes, he counters with a punch that carves straight through the dragon's body, killing it instantly. Once the chaos subsides, Rick collapses to the ground, exhausted. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a hospital bed, engulfed in pain. To his relief, Burnedead is there, explaining that he overloaded every magic circuit in his body during the battle, and by all accounts, he should already be dead. He was unconscious for a week, and Burnedead stayed by his side, waiting to personally invite him to join her party or Shakum Fist. Their goal to defeat Kaiser Alipate, just like Rick always dreamed. Her belief in him, sparked by his courage in the face of insurmountable odds, brings Rick to tears. It's the first time anyone has supported his dream of becoming an adventurer, reigniting the hope he thought he had lost. This brings us back to the present, where Rick has just passed his E rank exam. For the first time in his life, he can proudly declare that he is an adventurer. After the announcement, he visits Lynx, who is still recovering in the hospital. Lynx congratulates him on passing the exam and asks if he's still up for drinks. Excited to hang out, Rick's expression shifts when Lynx mentions visiting him at home. He tries to dissuade Lynx, but after persistent questioning, he reluctantly gives directions, jokingly advising Lynx to wear his strongest armor for protection. Upon arriving at Rick's home, Lynx is stunned to realize he's entered a demon lord's castle. As Rick greets him at the door, he's relieved to find the inside far nicer than Lynx anticipated. He apologizes for Lynx's long journey, explaining that monsters avoid the castle. Curious, Lynx asks why he needed armor if there are no monsters. Rick replies it's for Lynx's protection, not from monsters, but from something else entirely. They step inside, where Burnedead greets Lynx, thanking him for his assistance earlier. Just then, Alice comes barreling down the stairs, excitement radiating from her. She launches a massive lightning spell straight at Lynx. If it had hit, he would have been done for, but Rick swoops in, saving him just in time. Rick scolds Alice for using magic in the castle, reminding her that he specifically told her not to. She pouts, complaining that Rick hasn't played with her in ages. As Alice continues her antics, showing no remorse for her reckless magic use, Burnedead steps in with a stern look. She announces that Alice will face consequences for her actions, specifically the repair costs for the wall will be deducted from her food budget. This finally elicits an apology from Alice, who promises to refrain from using magic indoors again, though Rick knows deep down that it's only a matter of time before she breaks that promise. Turning to Lynx, Rick suggests that he go ahead while he plays with Alice. Lynx is welcome to make himself at home, but as he steps into the expansive castle, he finds himself at a loss for where to begin exploring. Glancing out the window, he spots Mazette casually working on military-grade weapons. Curious, he decides to say hello. Mazette greets Lynx warmly, having been informed of his visit by Rick. Lynx inquires about what Mazette is working on, and Mazette explains that building these weapons is an old hobby of his. He proudly introduces his latest creation, naming it Patricia, and invites Lynx to test it out. As Lynx aims for the target and pulls the trigger, he is taken aback by the sheer power Mazette has managed to pack into the weapon. Amazingly, Mazette has done all this just for fun. Afterward, Lynx continues his exploration of the castle and stumbles upon Braun's room. He's surprised to find an orc inside and leans in for a closer look. Braun notices him and invites Lynx to come in. Accepting the invitation, Lynx is astonished by the sheer number of books lining the walls. Braun explains that he enjoys being surrounded by books and has been collecting them, though he admits he hasn't had much time to read lately since he's been focusing on training Rick. Intrigued, Lynx asks if Braun has been overseeing most of Rick's training. When Braun confirms this, Lynx expresses his desire to receive a lesson from Braun as well. Motivated by Lynx's enthusiasm, Braun agrees to teach him, eager to share his knowledge. Meanwhile, Rick finishes playing with Alice and sets off to find Lynx so they can grab those drinks. To his dismay, Mazette informs him that Lynx headed into the forest with Braun. Panic surges through Rick. He knows exactly what kind of training Braun is notorious for, and his concern for Lynx's safety intensifies. In the forest, Lynx finds himself teetering on the edge of a cliff, weights tied to his ankles. As he plummets, convinced this is his last moment, He begins to say goodbye to his daughters, apologizing for not being able to return home. Fortunately, he lands on the belly of a boar that Renette had planned to use for dinner, miraculously saving himself. Grateful, Lynx thanks Renette for saving his life, and she can already tell that Braun was behind the absurdity of this training. Lynx confirms her suspicion, explaining that Braun had instructed him to run down the cliff with weights attached. Before he could process the command, Braun had already pushed him off the edge. Renette acknowledges Lynx's justified fears about dying, reminding him that Braun was the leading cause of Rick's near-death experiences during training. Unfortunately for Lynx, there's no escape from Braun's training once it begins, and he's dragged off into the woods to continue his intense regimen. By the end of the day, Lynx is still alive but completely drained. Rick asks him why he agreed to train with Braun despite knowing the grueling nature of his methods. Lynx thought it wouldn't be so bad since Braun promised him some light training. That's where Lynx went wrong. Rick has learned the hard way that trusting Braun to go easy is a mistake, as is trusting Alice to behave or Mazette to take anything seriously. The others chuckle, pointing out that Braun can always just revive Lynx if he dies, so they see no issue with the training. They even tease Rick, saying he's responsible for any trauma Lynx endures since he invited him to the castle in the first place. Later that evening, as Lynx recovers from his intense training, he and Rick sit down together while Renette pours them tea, waiting for dinner. Lynx remarks on Renette's kindness and casually asks Rick about the nature of his relationship with her. Rick insists he doesn't have a romantic connection with Renette, mentioning their age difference. He's in his 30s, while she's only 16, concluding that it wouldn't work out. Lynx, however, sees things differently. He points out that age is just a number and encourages Rick to consider asking Renette out. He shares his own experience, mentioning that he is 20 years older than his wife, yet their age difference has never posed a problem in their marriage. All Rick needs is the right moment to express his feelings. Later that night, as dinner is prepared, everyone gathers in the dining room. Lynx compliments Renette on her incredible cooking, and the others echo his praise, happily requesting refills. As Renette leaves to gather more food, Lynx seizes the opportunity to urge Rick to approach Renette and further their relationship. Encouraged, Rick decides to help her. Once Rick is gone, Lynx turns to the others, eager to learn more about Rick's innate skill. Braun explains that Rick's ability activates under certain conditions, which means he can't use it at will. While it would be advantageous for it to be always active, even without it, Rick's power level is already at S rank. If his skill, Reckless Soul, were to activate, he could easily surpass them all. When Rick and Renette return, Braun takes the chance to ask Lynx a pressing question. Since Lynx works at Central, he inquires if he has heard anything about the 6 magical stones known as the jewels. Lynx recognizes them from the legends of Yamato, understanding their significance in the quest to defeat Kaiser Alipate. The jewels are essential for opening the door to the Source Spiral, where Kaiser sleeps, and they activate only once every 200 years. Lynx had thought the legends were mere tales, but seeing how seriously Rick and the others are discussing them convinces him of their truth. Though he can't think of any specific information regarding the jewels, he offers to check the confidential records at Central for any leads. Braun expresses his gratitude for Lynx's willingness to help. As the evening winds down, Rick turns to Lynx, seeking more relationship advice. After all, his attempt to help Renette didn't go as planned, as she's just too good for him. In a quiet corner of the guild, a girl named Ray mops the floors, frustration evident on her face. She's an adventurer, after all, and feels she should be out slaying monsters instead of cleaning. Just then, she overhears a group of adventurers at the front desk discussing a quest. Intrigued, she makes her way over to eavesdrop. Rick and his team are seeking to take on a quest with a threat level of 82. The guildmaster, however, informs them they cannot proceed without a party of 4, including at least 2 adventurers of a rank or above. It's a simple enough problem to solve, and they request the guildmaster find someone to fill the spot. As luck would have it, Ray, yearning for real adventures, is the closest candidate. The guildmaster approaches her and offers her the chance to join the party for the day. Ray is initially unsure why it matters so much, but seeing that the group consists of an old man and a little girl, she decides to ignore the oddities and introduce herself. Eager to join, she sets off with them on their quest. As they journey, Alice senses something ahead. Curious, Ray asks if they're hunting for something specific. Rick explains they've received a tip about a special magic stone believed to be located nearby. Upon hearing about the magic stone, Ray's mind races with thoughts of its potential value. Though she quickly learns that the party doesn't intend to sell it, it could be dangerous in the wrong hands and even attract monsters. But Ray, undeterred, confidently asserts that she's strong enough to handle any monsters they encounter. Although she's currently only F rank, she vows to climb the ranks to a rank soon. When she asks about Rick's rank, he sheepishly admits he just got promoted to E rank. Internally, Ray can't help but think of him as an old loser for still being E rank at his age. As they move deeper into the forest, Alice spots a wyvern, exactly what they were hoping to find. Ray begins to panic. Wyverns are fearsome creatures, but Braun, with a casual demeanor, walks up and nonchalantly slaps the wyvern away, intentionally provoking it to summon backup. This action sends Ray into a frenzy, realizing that a swarm of wyverns could spell disaster for any adventurer. Growing tired of her complaints, Bronn tells Rick to take Ray away for a bit. As they walk, Ray expresses disbelief over Bronn's reckless decision to attract the wyvern's attention. But just as they chat, the sound of wyvern corpses crashing to the ground fills the air. Bronn and Alice are already engaged in battle, and Ray stands frozen, astonished by the spectacle. Her moment of shock is cut short as a red wyvern swoops down toward her. Luckily, Rick pulls her to safety just in time. Ray knows that red wyverns are tough even for rank adventurers, and she urges Rick to leave before they get overwhelmed, but to her astonishment, Rick strides up and decapitates the wyvern with a single punch, leaving her in disbelief once again. The following day, Ray reflects on her wild experience with the guild. The guildmaster, pleased she made it back alive, mentions that Orichalcum Fist is the strongest party in the continent, composed entirely of rank adventurers. This realization ignites a fire within Ray to train harder, aspiring to reach S rank. She hands her broom to the guildmaster, determined to start her training immediately, much to the guildmaster's dismay, since sweeping the floors is still her responsibility. Meanwhile, after their successful wyvern hunt, Rick and his team retrieve one of the jewels from the wyvern's den. With Mazette's magic, they pinpoint the location of the next jewel, which lies in Heratopia, a vast city renowned for its colosseums and formidable fighters. 400 years ago, King Alexander of Heratopia built a colosseum where warriors would gather to battle, and he himself became an undefeated champion with 10,000 victories to his name. The colosseum's fame birthed the kingdom of Heraya, forever enshrining King Alexander as its founder. Bronn expresses a wish to have sparred with Alexander at least once, though he jokes that such an encounter would likely flatten the kingdom. In Heratopia, being a fighter is a celebrated profession. But while Bronn is intrigued, he suggests they should focus on finding the item that brought them there. The others agree, but whenever they approach someone for information, the locals flee in terror at the sight of Bronn. Frustrated with their lack of progress, Rick proposes they check in at the town hall for useful information. Just as they're about to leave, they notice a girl being harassed by a brash man. Rick steps forward, ready to intervene, but Bronn confidently strides over instead. The man, emboldened, challenges Bronn to a fight, a mistake he soon regrets. Bronn gladly accepts and disappears into a dark alley with the man. A loud crack echoes from the alley, followed by silence. Moments later, Bronn emerges, dragging the man's limp body behind him. Surprisingly, the man, having narrowly escaped death, introduces himself as Gold, now a changed individual after his harrowing experience. As Ray introduces herself as Militia, Bronn pulls out the red jewel and asks if either of them has seen something like it in town. Gold squints at the gem, claiming he's seen something similar before but can't quite place it. Militia recognizes it too, but struggles to remember where she's seen it. Just then, a vibrant parade passes by, celebrating this year's upcoming fighting tournament, igniting excitement in both Militia and Gold. Gold explains to Ray that the King of Fists tournament is just 2 months away. It's a legendary event to crown the champion of all fighters, attracting over 500,000 spectators each year. The parade is led by the 5-time champion, Kerwin Wolf, a beloved figure known for his incredible strength. As they watch, Militia and Gold notice something glimmering on Kerwin's champion belt. It's the jewel Rick and the others are searching for. After the parade, Kerwin heads to his gym to unwind. The owner approaches him, apologizing for the publicity stunts, but emphasizing the importance of generating hype for the upcoming tournaments. While Kerwin acknowledges the necessity, he admits feeling bored. He consistently wins without facing worthy opponents. He wishes for a real challenge. Just then, Rick and Ray walk in. Kerwin immediately senses they are different from the usual fighters. The gym owner scolds them for barging in uninvited, but Rick clarifies they're not fans, they're adventurers seeking a specific gem. Before Rick can elaborate, Bronn interrupts, cutting to the chase. He boldly declares he wants the belt, prompting the gym owner to assume they're thieves. Bronn quickly reassures him they're not here to steal, they need the jewel from the belt, once belonging to a former party member. He promises to have a perfect replacement gem made for it. Skeptical, the owner calls for help to eject the intruders, but Kerwin interjects, stating he can tell when someone is lying, and Bronn doesn't carry the scent of deception. While he believes Bronn's claim about the jewel, Kerwin insists he can't just hand it over. The belt symbolizes the pride of Heraya. The only way for Bronn to acquire it is to become the new champion. Bronn agrees, ready to accept the challenge. As they leave, the gym owner grumbles about their rudeness. Kerwin, however, reflects on their unique prowess from Ray's demeanor. He senses a wide array of lethal skills, while Rick may appear unremarkable but has trained to an inhuman level. Bronn, by all accounts, is the most intriguing of all. Outside, Bronn shares his plan. They should all enter the tournament as fighters to win the belt fair and square. He explains the process first. They must pass preliminaries held in both the east and west of the kingdom. After winning those matches, they can finally compete in the tournament. Bronn will register through the eastern gate, while Rick and Ray will enter through the western gate, keeping them in separate brackets. While Rick and Ray agree with the plan, they express concern about Braun navigating the town alone. However, Braun has already secured Gold's assistance as a guide. For Rick and Ray, the path to entry requires passing a test similar to the promotion exams at the Adventurers Guild. When Rick steps into the arena for his test, he learns he must engage in a mock battle against a new recruit. The examiner informs him that his opponent has won every match thus far, but reassures him that regardless of the outcome, he will pass as long as he meets certain criteria. Suddenly, the doors swing open, and a confident voice rings out, introducing herself as the Flash due to her unmatched speed. But that confidence quickly falters when she realizes her opponent is Rick. It's Angelica, who nervously greets him, though Rick shares her concern about the awkwardness of facing each other again after their last encounter. Angelica reveals her siblings aren't with her, easing Rick's worries. Despite knowing Rick's strength, she feels pressured to maintain her undefeated streak and resolves to go all out against him. As she launches her attack, however, her momentum falters, and she stumbles flat on the ground, completely caught off guard. As Angelica struggles to regain her footing, she realizes she must have tripped due to her nerves. Determined, she stands up and prepares to dash at Rick once more, only to find herself falling again. Confused, she soon understands it's not her nerves causing the falls, it's Rick's secret technique at play. Looking down at her, Rick smirks, asking her what she thinks of the new skill he's been honing over the past few months. After recognizing how much stronger he's become, Rick didn't want to risk hurting anyone in a fight, so he developed the 8 secret arts of going easy. Right now, he's employing the first art, constant leg sweeps. It's a method designed to demoralize and incapacitate opponents without inflicting any real damage. Angelica finds it insulting, but Rick points out that she hasn't been hurt at all. Even as he uses leg sweeps, Rick's speed leaves Angelica struggling to keep up, a feat even she finds impossible despite her exceptional agility. Thinking quickly, she decides the best course of action is to keep her distance from Rick, but as she tries to back away, she finds herself swept again. Refusing to give up, Angelica pushes forward and Rick admires her tenacity, announcing that he'll fight her seriously now. At the mention of a serious fight, Angelica's resolve crumbles. She pouts, defeated. Disappointed, Rick watches as the bout ends abruptly in his favor, but at least he's now recognized as a fighter eligible for the preliminaries. Before he can head off to register, Angelica runs up to him, tears in her eyes, asking why he always has to overpower her. Her phrasing worries Rick, fearing it could be misunderstood, so he suggests they grab a bite to eat to clear the air. They head to a nearby restaurant owned by Melissa's parents. She's thrilled to treat Rick and Ray to some fruity delicacies. As she's leaving, she asks if Braun will be joining them, revealing her budding interest in him. Rick informs her that Braun is registering on the eastern side of town, disappointing her as she bids them farewell. Once alone, Angelica asks Rick about his intentions for being in town. He reveals he plans to win the tournament, causing her to gasp in disbelief at his casual approach to such a lofty goal. Intrigued, she asks about her own reasons for being there, to which she admits she intends to enter the tournament as well. This motivates Rick to commit himself fully, surprising her since she thought he'd aim for next year instead. Angelica explains the grueling qualifications to enter the preliminaries. A fighter must win at least 40 matches against various opponents, averaging around 10 matches per month. With only a week left before the preliminaries begin, she doubts Rick has enough time to achieve such a feat without burning out. Undeterred, Rick reveals he's already scheduled 10 matches a day for the next 4 days. The next day, he heads to the arena for his first match against a fighter named Grit. The coordinator warns him that Grit is rumored to cheat by using weapons, though they've never been able to prove it. Rick sizes Grit up, finding him suspicious but sees no visible weapons, so he feels confident. As the match begins, Grit pulls out an impact stone hidden in his shoe, a tool that amplifies his punch's power tremendously. He unleashes a devastating blow at Rick, creating a massive dust cloud. When it settles, however, it's Grit who lies injured, 2 new elbows bending awkwardly. Bewildered, Grit can't comprehend his defeat. He typically shatters boulders with the impact stone. Rick prepares to attack next, using his secret art of going easy. He intentionally throws a punch that misses, generating a gust of wind that sends Grit flying. Spectators are left in shock, witnessing an incredible display as Rick's first match concludes. It's clear this year's King of Fists tournament will be one for the ages. Later, Rick and Ray watch one of Angelica's matches, where she lives up to her title of the Flash, effortlessly defeating her opponent by kicking him straight into a wall. After the match, Rick and Ray congratulate her for achieving her 40th victory, officially qualifying her for the preliminaries. Angelica can hardly believe Rick wants to complete 40 matches in just 4 days, pointing out the logistical challenges he faces. He's cut off mid-explanation when he announces he has another match at the Green Hill venue. Angelica's eyes widen in panic. It's over 30 kilometers away, and she knows even the fastest carriage would struggle to get there in time. But Rick isn't worried. He's already dashing off, creating a dust cloud as he speeds away. Seeing his incredible speed, Angelica feels her title slipping away. Ray turns to her and asks if she'd like to watch Rick's match. Angelica eagerly agrees, but then realizes she won't be able to keep up with him. Noticing her hesitation, Ray offers to take her there instead. Although Angelica feels a bad omen about this, Ray swiftly scoops her up and begins jumping from roof to roof to roof at breakneck speed. As Angelica clings to Reinette, pleading to return to solid ground, Reinette dismisses her fears, insisting the roads are far too convoluted. Eventually, they arrive at the arena just in time for Rick's match, but Angelica is so busy battling her motion sickness that she completely misses the fight. Rick, on the other hand, feels he faltered in that match, still needing practice to ensure his attacks remain non-lethal. He brushes it off though, stating he needs to head to his next venue, dashing away before Angelica can gather her bearings. Determined not to endure Reinette's wild carrying again, she tries to back out, but before she knows it, Reinette has her in tow, hopping through town yet again. Rick continues to dominate his matches effortlessly across town, while Angelica suffers from severe motion sickness. Finally, after 4 grueling days, Rick achieves his goal, winning all 40 matches and officially qualifying for the preliminaries. Relieved, Angelica is glad she's in a different bracket, at least she won't have to face him just yet. Reinette asks if Angelica had hoped to win the tournament. She admits she would have liked to, but with Rick in the mix, her chances seem slim. Adding to her anxiety, she learns that Braun, Rick's mentor, is also competing. Having never met him, she can only imagine his prowess. Reinette warns that he's even more formidable than Rick. However, Angelica clings to the hope that participating might at least deter the guy she's been trying to avoid. Reinette, curious, asks which guy she's talking about, but Angelica deflects, quickly changing the subject to ask where Rick has gone. Reinette informs her that Rick went on a casual 600-kilometer jog, a feat that no longer surprises Angelica, who's come to expect his absurd antics. Intrigued, Angelica asks Reinette how she can tolerate accompanying Rick so frequently. To her surprise, Reinette admits she enjoys it, savoring their shared adventures. Angelica suddenly realizes they might be getting rumors started about their relationship. Reinette, unbothered, casually mentions her feelings for Rick, leaving Angelica in shock. Just then, a man approaches them, offering a request instead of flirting. It turns out he's in dire need of part-time workers as he's short-staffed. Later that day, Rick returns from his jog, only to be approached by Snape, the chairman of the West League. Surprised, Rick asks how Snape knows him, only to learn he's gained a reputation as the fastest man to qualify in the West League. Snape shakes hands with Rick, but his guard interrupts, revealing that Angelica isn't present. Disappointment crosses Snape's face as he mentions he and Angelica share a close relationship. He's just a merchant friendly with the Diarmid family. Shifting the topic, Rick asks Snape about his retirement from fighting, leading to a surprising admission. Snape had once won a small tournament, but that victory was 2 decades ago, long before his retirement. Snape's eyes light up as he reminisces about the exhilarating cheers of the crowd, yet he's now focused on business, needing to cut their conversation short. Before leaving, he asks Rick to pass along a message to Angelica, cautioning her to take care of herself. On Snape departs, Rick heads inside to find Militia, who expresses concern after seeing him with Snape. She warns him to be careful. Rumors suggest Snape has ties to the criminal underworld. This revelation stuns Rick, especially since Snape is connected to Angelica's family. The unexpected announcement that Snape's company is a major sponsor for the tournament adds another layer of intrigue. Just then, Rick overhears some bar patrons chatting about the bunny girls outside. The mention of a dark elf bunny girl piques his interest. The scene shifts to the front of the West League Stadium, where Angelica and Reinette are volunteering as advertising bunny girls. While Angelica initially finds joy in the task, she secretly dreads it, having felt unable to deny the man's desperate plea. The job isn't too bad, but the drunken patrons tend to be a nuisance. One persistent guy crosses the line, attempting to grab Angelica, but she quickly retaliates, delivering a fierce beating while angrily stomping on his head. Rick strolls over and is taken aback by Angelica's bunny outfit, leaving her flustered as she tries to explain her presence there. However, his attention quickly shifts to Reinette, and the tension between them crackles. In the background, Kerwin's coach scans the newspaper and spots an article about Braun, noting that he finished all his qualification matches in just 2 days. Kerwin comments that, compared to Braun's ferocity, Rick seems tame, but he's still thrilled to see Rick complete his matches in 4 days. The coach reflects on his journey to a rundown city, where he sought fresh talent. It was in a dimly lit bar that he discovered Kerwin, known as the Hungry Wolf of the Slums, in a fierce battle against an entire gang that had been after him. Kerwin emerged victorious. As he caught his breath, he asked the coach if he had come to take him down, but instead, the coach offered an opportunity of a lifetime. He wanted to scout Kerwin as a fighter for Herotopia, where his strength could earn him anything he desired by winning fights. The promise of facing strong opponents reignited Kerwin's excitement for battle, and he agreed to join. Now, the leagues are set to begin, with only one fighter from each block able to advance to the tournament. The tension in the air is palpable, with fierce battles ahead. The first fight in Block A pits Angelica against a fighter named Helen. From the start, it's clear Angelica is straining herself more than usual, a departure from her typical demeanor. After a hard-fought battle, she manages to kick Helen into a wall, but the effort leaves her winded. Next is Rick's match. His opponent attempts to charge up a special move, but with a swift chop to the neck, Rick knocks him out effortlessly. The trend continues, with Angelica struggling through her victories while Rick annihilates the competition. Angelica's winning streak puts her in a precarious position if she wants to guarantee her place in the tournament. She can't afford to lose a single match. Rick encourages her to do her best and prepares to offer advice for her next fight, but she walks off before he can say anything. In her next match, Angelica faces a tank of an opponent. While she retains her speed, her attacks seem far less effective against his incredible defenses. Desperate, she incorporates magic into her strategy, creating a water prison and launching a bolt of lightning, yet the behemoth stands strong, mocking her for running out of steam. Angelica, exhausted and unable to keep up, suffers defeat at the hands of the giant. After the match, she receives healing magic at the infirmary, where she's greeted by Rick waiting outside. He senses her frustration and suggests that her haste may have cost her the match. While it's true her opponent had amazing defenses, Angelica could have switched tactics instead of draining her stamina. Refusing to listen, she attempts to brush him off, but Rick persists, wanting to understand what's bothering her. Reluctantly, Angelica reveals her complicated situation. After her parents died, she and her siblings were left to manage the dire mute estate. As children, they struggled, leading to financial ruin. Their grandfather made a deal with Snape, offering financial support in exchange for Angelica's engagement to him, a move meant to connect Snape with the nobility. Determined to restore their family name, Angelica and her siblings worked tirelessly to avoid relying on Snape, but by then it was too late to call off the engagement. Anguish clouds her eyes as she admits to Rick that she tried investigating Snape, hoping to uncover something to nullify the engagement, only to discover he's become a tournament sponsor. With that role, he could insert a fighter of his choosing into the tournament. Just then, a commotion erupts from the nearby bar, prompting them to investigate. They find the man who defeated Angelica, arguing with a lizard man who's holding a waitress by the neck. The lizard man refuses to release her, and when Taylor attempts to intervene, the punch is effortlessly absorbed before he is knocked out. Guy, the lizard man, mocks Taylor for his perceived weakness, returning his attention to the waitress. But Angelica can't stand by any longer and yells for him to stop. Fully aware of her lack of power against him, she steels herself against the impending confrontation. Guy, offended by her audacity, prepares to retaliate, but Rick swiftly catches his arm, diffusing the situation before it escalates. Just then, Snape arrives, commanding Guy to calm down and release the waitress. Guy reluctantly obeys, revealing that he's Snape's younger brother, known for his severe anger management issues. Despite his menacing presence, he quickly calms down under Snape's guidance. After Snape leaves, Angelica explains that Snape invested heavily into her engagement, using his sponsorship of the tournament to recoup his money through gambling rings. This revelation solidifies her resolve to take out Snape's fighter and force him to call off the engagement, but deep down, she knows Guy is a formidable opponent. Rick, pondering her predicament, offers to train her. The thought of Rick's grueling training, however, fills Angelica with apprehension, sounding more like a death threat than a promise of improvement. Despite her fears, she agrees to his training, recognizing the need to grow stronger for the battles ahead. Before proceeding with the training, Rick warns Angelica that his methods will be so tough they defy all logic. But by now, Angelica is resolute, determined to do whatever it takes to grow stronger. Impressed by her determination, Rick straps over 100 kg of weights to her body, cautioning her not to mess up her physical enhancement magic, or the consequences could be deadly. Confused, Angelica asks for clarification on the training regimen, but Rick remains tight-lipped, only tying a rope around himself before taking off running. Angelica is yanked behind him, desperately wishing she hadn't agreed to this madness. She struggles to keep up as Rick explains the concept of baby bird running, a brutal exercise where she's pulled by someone faster, forcing her body to adapt or risk being left behind. While she has great acceleration, Rick notes her movements lack stability, which they aim to improve. She begs for a break, hoping to mentally prepare herself, but Rick insists they must push beyond their limits. For the next 6 hours, Angelica endures grueling training, barely clinging to life by the end. Her legs feel like they're about to detach, yet Rick praises her for surviving her first session. He recalls how, during his own training with Raynette, he passed out almost immediately, dragged across the floor, until he died 3 times in one day. Still, Angelica is proud of her perseverance, even if this was just the morning session. After a brief 1-hour break, Rick prepares to drag her into the afternoon session. Dread washes over Angelica as she pleads for a more lenient schedule, but Rick is unyielding, promising to return shortly. 5 days into this torturous training, she finds herself sitting in a random bar, trying to justify her actions. It's not laziness, it's tactical retreat. Surely Rick won't find her here, far away from his relentless training. Just as she thinks she's safe, Rick appears outside the window, having searched the entire kingdom for her in only 15 minutes. Expecting a scolding for abandoning her training, she's surprised when Rick instead expresses understanding. He shares his own experiences, recounting the countless times he tried to escape his own training and the thousands of times he met his demise. He recalls a specific moment when Brost accidentally killed him, leading to a comical revival thanks to Alice's magic. after which Bros playfully suggested he could revive Rick 2,000 more times. Rick, however, was determined to train, fueled by Bros' words the regret of quitting would far outweigh the suffering. This perspective helped Rick endure, with the promise that if he truly wished to quit, he could do so at any time. Angelica listens intently, sharing her own struggles with noble customs. Despite being trained in etiquette, she finds it absurd to need 3 different sets of spoons for a single meal. She aspires to contribute to her family not as a noble woman, but as the first special grade female knight. And her willingness to endure any suffering for that goal inspires Rick. Encouraged, they head outside to continue training, and Rick shares an idea he's been considering. Given that Angelica is a knight, she should learn to wield her body like a sword. While she points out that tournament rules only allow fighters to use their bodies, Rick suggests a technique to sharpen her hands like blades. Angelica is astonished, unaware such a technique existed, but as it's not Rick's specialty, he calls for Renette to assist. By the time Angelica's next match arrives, she appears utterly exhausted, her spirit drained from the rigorous training. Observers notice her unsettling transformation, but the match against a massive opponent demands a shift in strategy. Angelica can't rely on her usual rapid strikes, but after countless hours of grueling training, she has forged a new fighting style. This time, she channels all her energy into a single, powerful punch, knocking her opponent out and securing her victory. Yet the aftermath leaves her disoriented, barely recalling the details of her performance. As she grapples with her thoughts, Rick reassures her that what matters is that she won and has qualified for the tournament. Just then, Alice and Matt enter the bar, where Rick greets them. They share news about a tip that led to a false rumor regarding a jewel, leaving Matt feeling frustrated over the wasted time. Amid the chatter, Matt notices a cute girl nearby, attempting to flirt, only for her to spin away, her crush arriving just moments later as Gold announces Braun's return. They gather to eat, and Mayette asks Braun about his recent endeavors. Braun reveals that he and Rick plan to enter the tournament to win a jewel as their prize. Alice eagerly expresses her desire to join, but Rick knows her power could wreak havoc on the kingdom. Braun then calls out to Angelica, having heard she's also competing. She confirms her participation and shares the ordeal of training with Rick and Renette, both of whom nearly killed her multiple times. Rick reassures Angelica that the mere fact she hasn't died yet is proof of her inherent talent, yet doubt lingers in her mind. Can she truly grow strong enough to defeat G? Both Brost and May urge her to have faith in her hard work, reminding her that perseverance will yield results. Finally, the day of the tournament arrives and the match pairings are revealed. Rick breathes a sigh of relief, grateful he won't have to face Brost anytime soon if that were the case. He'd simply withdraw from the competition. As Angelica scans the brackets, she realizes they are clearly rigged to favor G. With this arrangement, G won't encounter Braun or Kerwin until the finals. She suspects Snape wants to showcase G's battles against weaker opponents, building hype and betting against him later to create an illusion of struggle. Determined to disrupt Snape's plans, Angelica hopes to face G early on. Though her strategy aligns with the tournament layout, Rick questions her fallback plan if she doesn't get to face G until the finals. Honestly, she hadn't thought that far ahead, but for now everything seems to have worked out, so she brushes it off. Meanwhile, G appears disinterested in the tournament. As Rick and Brost make their way to the stands, they run into Kerwin, who congratulates them on making it to the tournament. With fierce determination, Brost declares he will take the championship belt from Kerwin, who's equally eager for a good fight. Kerwin reminisces about his recruitment into the coach's gym, where he found strength among lesser-known fighters who made it to the semifinals. When the match begins, G faces off against a fighter named Herman. As G remains aloof, Herman grows frustrated with G's apparent lack of seriousness. In an attempt to assert himself, Herman strikes, only to find his attack ineffective. G retaliates, but his punch misses, creating a massive dust cloud that conceals the arena. In the ensuing chaos, he accidentally knocks Herman out of the ring, showcasing his raw power and unintentionally enhancing his reputation. Rick observes G's peculiar style. Despite his overwhelming strength, G fights like an amateur without formal training. The matches unfold as expected, with Angelica, Rick, and Braun all emerging victorious in their respective rounds. As the final match of the day approaches, Kerwin prepares to face an unnamed opponent. Rick and Braun watch closely, eager to see what Kerwin has to offer. The fight commences and Kerwin's opponent charges. In a swift motion, Kerwin drops his opponent to the ground before he can even finish his attack. It's not that Kerwin has extraordinary reflexes, rather, he seems to anticipate his opponent's moves, almost like he can smell their intentions. However, in an unexpected twist, Kerwin willingly allows himself to be punched, adding drama to the encounter. He quickly recovers and finishes the fight with a single decisive blow. The next day brings the semifinals, and Angelica's hard work is about to be put to the ultimate test as she prepares to face G. As she walks through the stadium corridor, Snape approaches Rick, asking if he can sit nearby. Though Rick has no objections, he is curious why Snape isn't in his designated sponsor seat. Snape admits he wants a close view of the match, considering the fighters are his younger brother and future bride. In the corridor, Angelica confronts G, declaring she'll be his opponent today. Initially, G doesn't recognize her, but quickly recalls she's the girl Snape plans to marry. Snape jokingly requests G not to ruin Angelica's face too much for the wedding photos. Unfazed, Angelica vows to demonstrate the fruits of her training. G, however, dismisses her resolve, asserting that hard work means nothing when he hasn't trained a day in his life, and nothing she does will change her status as a weakling. As the match begins, Angelica lunges at G, but her kicks fail to penetrate his defenses. Retreating momentarily, she decides to channel her mana, dashing forward and managing to make a small cut on G's arm. The crowd gasps, shocked that even the finest swords struggle to cut through G's armor, let alone a mere kick. Snape's surprise is palpable, but Rick reminds him not to underestimate Angelica's capabilities. What G doesn't realize is that Angelica has mastered one of Reinette's secret techniques, a skill that allows her to slice through obstacles with her body. During training, Reinette demonstrated this technique by effortlessly cutting a boulder in half, leaving Angelica in awe. Rick had encouraged her, asserting that with enough practice, she too could learn this powerful skill, despite her initial disbelief. Angelica dedicated herself to the training, determined to prove her worth. After countless hours, she finally harnessed the technique, adjusting it to suit her body. Now, she channels her magic into one powerful strike, but the exertion of such power puts immense strain on her body. After enduring rigorous training with Rick, Angelica finally harnesses her new technique, enabling her to inflict consistent damage on G. However, the odds are still stacked against her as G's raw power overshadows her efforts. As the match unfolds, G punches the ground, conjuring a cloud of dust. While her vision is obscured, he attempts to land a decisive blow, but Angelica leans back just in time. It's a close call, but she resolves not to fall for the same trick again. She darts around the arena, slashing at G relentlessly. From the sidelines, Snape's frustration is palpable not because he believes Angelica might win, but because he knows G's next move all too well. G creates another smokescreen, but this time he's intent on ending the fight. He swiftly appears behind Angelica, delivering a powerful smack that sends her crashing into the wall. Initially, G had considered taking it easy on her out of respect for Snape, but Angelica's determination has pushed him past his limits. Refusing to stay down, Angelica tries to close the gap with her flickering feet technique. Yet, G counters with ease, using his tail to send her flying away mid-attack. He's seen her technique enough times to anticipate it perfectly, and he knocks her against the wall again. Snape watches, worried about the trajectory of the fight, and he recounts his first encounter with G, his adoptive brother, when he was just 8 years old. G had brutally defeated him in a sparring match, prompting Snape to reevaluate his career as a fighter. Gifted with unparalleled genetics for combat, G possesses an innate strength that dwarfs any ordinary fighter. Angelica had initially thought Snape was rigging the matches, but the truth is, he is simply confident in G's superiority. However, G's focus has shifted. He's no longer interested in the tournament. Instead, he seeks to demonstrate to Angelica that her training means nothing against his raw talent. Grabbing her, he taunts her, asking if she has finally accepted her place as untalented trash, but Angelica refuses to back down. With her last ounce of strength, she delivers a feeble punch that fails to faze him. Infuriated, G decides to take it up a notch, intent on finishing her off, despite the tournament's rules. Just as G charges with murderous intent, a boot suddenly flies through the air, knocking G's claws away from Angelica. It's Rick who has arrived. Filled with a rage he rarely feels, he won't tolerate G's actions any longer. After the match, G angrily confronts Rick backstage, furious that he ruined his chance to finish Angelica. Rick, however, remains silent, which only aggravates G further. As G attempts to strike Rick, he finds himself outmaneuvered, with Rick slipping behind him and calmly putting his boot back on. He could retaliate but chooses not to, stating instead that he'll make G pay by humiliating him in the tournament. The anticipation builds for the next match, and Rick, fueled by his emotions, inadvertently forgets to hold back against his opponent. His overwhelming strength ensures a swift victory, securing his place in the semifinals. Eager to check on Angelica, Rick learns from the attending nurse that, while her injuries are severe, she is stable and out of immediate danger. Relief washes over him, yet he feels a pang of sorrow for Angelica, who had pushed herself so hard only to face such adversity. The following day, Rick encounters Angelica in the halls. She appears to be recovering thanks to Brost's healing abilities, but Rick gently reminds her not to overexert herself. He hesitates to bring up the previous day's fight, but Angelica speaks up first, apologizing for not meeting his expectations. Despite his efforts to train her, she feels she has failed to achieve her goals, questioning her worth as a fighter. Rick reassures her that she has nothing to apologize for. Her dedication and hard work have not gone unnoticed. He expresses regret for not accurately gauging G's true strength, which may have prepared her better. He urges her to watch his match against G closely, promising to demonstrate the results that come from perseverance. As the time for Rick's battle approaches, he finds himself face to face with G once again. Surprisingly, G expresses a fleeting concern for Angelica, suggesting he might apologize later. For a moment, Rick wonders if G has finally grasped the weight of his actions. But the moment passes as G quickly turns the sentiment on its head, declaring that he feels sorry for Angelica for having to live with the knowledge of her inferiority. With the match underway, Rick charges at G, delivering the first blow. To G's shock, Rick's punch sends him crashing to his knees. G is momentarily stunned. He never expected to be knocked down by a single punch. As he scrambles back to his feet, he charges at Rick, attacking wildly. Rick deftly dodges, striking G's core and delivering a powerful palm strike that takes the air right out of his lungs. Angelica watches in awe, believing Rick must be using superhuman strength. However, Raynette corrects her, explaining that Rick is barely exerting himself. Instead, he's employing the second technique of body control, the through-body attack, which bypasses all forms of armor to deal damage directly to the core. Despite G's natural advantages, Rick proves he can land effective strikes. Rick offers G an opportunity to withdraw, but G refuses, convinced of his superiority. He unleashes his Dragonite strengthening magic, momentarily knocking Rick back. However, Rick's strategy begins to unfold. He realizes G's magic drains his energy quickly, revealing his true limitations. As Rick continues to evade and counterattack, G starts to tire. With each failed punch, frustration mounts for him. Meanwhile, Rick remains unharmed, utilizing the flowing strikes technique to disperse the damage he's receiving. G's anger boils over. He can't comprehend why he is losing to someone using only Angelica's strength. Snape watches in disbelief, questioning whether Rick might possess greater talent than G. But those around him remind him that Rick's strength stems from relentless hard work, a concept G can't seem to grasp. Rick acknowledges G's potential, noting that he's a prodigy. As G prepares for one final attack, Rick is ready to show him just how far hard work can take someone. G must have thought he was the strongest in the world, but that's only because he had never faced anyone who could actually defeat him. Refusing to accept his limitations, G decides to unleash his trump card, the ancient dragon blood transformation. Instantly, he becomes a dragon-like powerhouse, and Rick struggles to keep up with his ferocious attacks. A barrage of strikes sends Rick reeling. His previous attempts are useless against G's newfound strength, durability, and speed. Recognizing the overwhelming talent that G possesses, Rick realizes that Angelica stands no chance against him at her current level. However, he believes that with intense training, Angelica could eventually surpass G. Rick outlines a path for her. After 6 months, her speed would be enough to blitz GE in 9 months. Her strength could easily overpower him, and after a year, she would be too fast for G to even see. But for now, she is far from ready, and it takes a certain kind of madness to endure such grueling training. Yet Angelica is determined to embrace that madness. With a swift strike, Rick knocks G to the ground, urging him to set aside his ego and commit to real training. But GE, still in denial, creates a smokescreen and charges at Rick in a last-ditch effort. Rick sees through the ruse, using the thread/technique to slice through G's defenses, knocking him down and claiming victory. The crowd erupts and cheers as Rick stands triumphant, while Angelica expresses her gratitude, promising to train hard until she reaches his level. As Angelica glances at Snape, she expects to see him agitated over G's loss. Surprisingly, he remains calm, revealing that while it's painful, seeing GEA's the arrogant bastard beaten brings him a sense of satisfaction. Though he may have lost a bet, he feels content. Angelica teases him about his inability to uphold the marriage contract with a noble family, but Snape confesses that marrying into nobility was never his true desire. He genuinely liked Angelica, which takes her by surprise. The next match features Braun against Kerwin. Kerwin is eager, recognizing Braun's immense strength, but struggling to find an opening. As the fight begins, Kerwin unleashes a flurry of punches, dodging Braun's counterattacks. Suddenly, the wall of the stadium collapses. G, now in a rampage fueled by his dragon form, threatens everyone around him, causing chaos and endangering the spectators. Kerwin, irritated by G's interference, confronts him, but to everyone's shock, he stops G's punch with one arm and sends him flying with a single blow, knocking him unconscious. Rick and the others are astonished G's strength had rivaled that of a top-rank adventurer, but Kerwin's ability to one-shot him indicates he is on the level of an S-ranker. However, due to the injuries caused by GE, the match between Kerwin and Braun is postponed until the next day to ensure the safety of the spectators. Disappointed yet intrigued, Kerwin senses doubt in his own strength despite his bravado. Meanwhile, Rick is off on a 700 km jog, reaching the town border where he notices a mountain that reminds him of Rhett. A dust cloud catches his eye, and curiosity leads him to find Kerwin training. Alone, Kerwin chose this remote location to avoid distractions, but now he seizes the opportunity to spar with Rick. Surprised by Kerwin's sudden attack, Rick engages, only to find Kerwin dodging effortlessly thanks to his foresight ability. Rick's serious punches come with surprising force, yet Kerwin manages to block them. Intrigued by Kerwin's ability to react quickly but still get hit by slower attacks, Rick learns that Kerwin has been holding back his strength in matches. Frustrated with the lack of challenge from his opponents, Kerwin had resorted to deliberately losing to keep the audience entertained. Over time, he had adapted his strength to maintain suspense during fights, Rick empathizes, urging Kerwin to unleash his true power against Braun, emphasizing that he better not hold back if he wants to survive. The following day, with a magic barrier erected for safety, the match between Braun and Kerwin begins. Kerwin launches a series of punches, all expertly blocked by Braun. However, a special rolling punch breaks through Braun's guard, shocking Rick. The match intensifies as Braun retaliates, forcing Kerwin to retreat. They acknowledge each other's strengths, but Kerwin admits he has been hiding his true power to keep the fights interesting. While Command criticizes Kerwin for deceiving his fans, Braun respects his dedication to entertainment. He offers to match Kerwin's usual strength by fighting using only 2 fingers and remaining stationary. The stage is set for an exhilarating showdown, where both fighters are determined to prove themselves without holding back any longer. Kerwin is bewildered as he faces Braun, who is effortlessly embarrassing him using just 2 fingers. Despite wanting to unleash his full power, Kerwin feels compelled to hold back, concerned about revealing his true strength. Suddenly, the gym owner shouts for Kerwin to stop pretending to be weaker than he is. He emphasizes that he has always dreamed of training the world's strongest fighter, and he knows that's Kerwin's dream as well. With this encouragement, Kerwin realizes it's time to fight at full strength. Charging at Braun, Kerwin throws a punch that generates a massive shockwave, forcing Braun to use 5 fingers to block. As the fight escalates, Kerwin switches tactics with 2 rolling punches, but Braun remains unfazed, grabbing Kerwin's leg and tossing him across the arena. Kerwin uses the steel body technique to cushion his fall, but the crowd is beginning to notice the surge in his power and whispers about his earlier deception. And hearing the murmurs, Kerwin knows it's too late to revert to his previous tactics, so he focuses entirely on defeating Braun. He begins chanting a 5th nature fire spell, unleashing a hellflame wave toward Braun. The crowd is stunned. It's rare for beastmen like him to possess such magical prowess. However, Braun nonchalantly kicks a rock to extinguish the flames, showcasing his strength. Undeterred, Kerwin uses Blink Step to close the distance and casts a 7th nature binding spell, followed by an 8th nature meteor spell. Rick and the others in his party are impressed, but Rick grows concerned that Kerwin's strength may compel Braun to stop holding back. Just as the meteor is about to strike, Braun acknowledges Kerwin's strength and vows to match his intensity, giving him a quarter thumbs up, a gesture among orcs that signifies respect before a fight. As Braun approaches, Kerwin instinctively senses he is about to be overpowered. Braun throws a punch that barely misses Kerwin, but the force of it sends him flying. Recovering, Kerwin unleashes a barrage of magical attacks, yet Braun remains unfazed. With a swift counter, Braun lands a devastating blow to Kerwin's abdomen, sending him crashing backward. Thanks to his layered defensive techniques, Kerwin survives, but he contemplates giving up, overwhelmed by Braun's strength. His fighting spirit refuses to let him quit, even as his mana and stamina dwindle. Just when he feels defeated, the crowd erupts in cheers, inspiring him to rise again. With renewed determination, Kerwin channels every ounce of remaining strength into a single punch. Although he lacks mana and stamina, his fighting spirit propels him forward, unleashing a powerful attack that surprisingly pushes Braun back, leaving him feeling accomplished despite the odds. After delivering the blow, Braun acknowledges Kerwin's incredible display of spirit, asking if he has truly given it his all. Kerwin, looking defeated, realizes that even his strongest attack couldn't faze Braun, but he takes solace in having pushed him back. However, Braun then delivers a punch that knocks Kerwin unconscious, yet he falls with a smile, satisfied with his performance. Following the match, Braun receives congratulations from Rick and Angelica, as his victory guarantees their party a jewel no matter the final's outcome. Rick, apprehensive about fighting Braun again, contemplates withdrawing, but Braun insists he wants to face Rick in the final match. As Braun walks off, Rick feels the weight of the challenge, his hair almost visibly thinning with anxiety. Later, after receiving treatment, Kerwin reads a newspaper article about his fight. The article notes the audience's anger at his previous deception, leaving Kerwin concerned about his role model status. However, seeing children idolizing him outside the gym reassures the owner that Kerwin's reputation remains intact. He expresses surprise at the power of Kerwin's last attack, and Kerwin admits he was so focused on the fight that the technique came to him spontaneously. In the aftermath of the fight, Kerwin finds himself nursing broken bones, yet the gym owner reassures him that losing isn't a setback, but rather a stepping stone for growth. Kerwin is grateful for the owner's care, questioning why he is so considerate. The owner responds, revealing he thinks of Kerwin as a son, willing to do anything for him. Just then, Braun enters the room, sensing he has intruded on a touching moment but decides to join anyway. He asks Kerwin how he's feeling, to which Kerwin humorously replies that most of his bones are broken. Braun offers to heal him, but Kerwin refuses, wanting to savor the pain as it's a reminder of his hard-fought battle. Inspired by Rick's earlier words, he looks forward to the impending finals between Braun and Rick. Meanwhile, Snake pays Rick a visit but finds him locked in his room, while Angelica tries to coax him out. Rick refuses, terrified of facing Braun and believing his life is more valuable than the tournament. Though Snake understands Rick's fears, he emphasizes how much everyone wants to see him compete. Rick stands firm, valuing his life over public expectation, leaving Snake to contemplate the situation. As Rick continues to isolate himself, Angelica challenges him, expressing her disappointment and frustration. She insists that if he were to die in the arena, it wouldn't matter since he could just be revived. Rick counters, stating she doesn't understand the true fear of death, particularly against someone like Braun. After she leaves, Met brings up how Braun had a training plan ready for Rick from the start, pointing out the oddity of this premeditated strategy. Mayed explains that Braun's training plan was crafted long ago to prepare someone capable of matching his strength, a necessity in their orc culture, where combat is a means of connection. He reminds Rick that while he can withdraw from the tournament, Braun is looking forward to a worthy challenge. This reflection sends Rick back to the first day he met Braun, where their handshake revealed his lack of martial skills and minimal mana. Despite this, Braun encouraged Rick, stressing the importance of rigorous training to improve. Back in the present, Angelica's frustration with Rick mounts, labeling him pathetic. Met understands Rick's fears, but also recognizes that few humans would willingly endure Braun's grueling training. Angelica asks if Braun's training was truly that brutal. Met confirms it was, explaining how Rick almost lost his sanity from the intensity, though he did manage to hold it together. In a surprising twist, Alice interrupts, informing Angelica that Rick does possess a skill, much to her shock as she had never seen him use one. May explains the skill is hard to activate and drains Rick significantly, leading Braun to forbid him from using it. That evening, Renette approaches Rick, reassuring him that she doesn't view him as pathetic. She expresses understanding of his fears, but adds that she would admire him even more if he found the courage to confront Braun, regardless of the outcome. As the tournament kicks off the next day, excitement buzzes through the crowd. The announcer lists impressive prizes, including cash, precious stones, and a couple's trip to a hot spring. Angelica and Rhett check on Rick, who insists he's fine despite his terrified demeanor. Renette then approaches and promises him a personal reward if he performs well against Braun, igniting a spark of determination in Rick. When the match begins, Rick charges at Braun with astonishing speed, managing to land a wound and draw blood. Braun is visibly impressed, while Snake watches in awe, struggling to comprehend the rapid sequence of events. Rick explains that he utilized a technique called thread slash to outmaneuver Braun and deliver a strike. Rick continues his onslaught, unleashing a series of attacks, jumping off the arena walls to deliver a kick. Braun counters expertly, throwing a punch, but Rick ducks and strikes again with thread slash cutting into Braun's stomach. This exchange showcases Rick's growth and tenacity, surprising everyone, especially Angelica, who wonders what Renette said to him that fueled such sudden confidence. Renette confides in Angelica that she told Rick he could join her on the couple's hot spring trip if he wins, a revelation that makes Angelica flustered at the thought of them spending the night together. Realizing that she needs to focus on the match, Angelica sets aside her jealousy as the battle unfolds. Braun, sensing Rick's determination, decides to fight with all his strength. He winds up for a punch so powerful that Rick has to leap out of the way, recalling why he feared facing Braun in the first place. Just as he steels himself for another attack, Braun unleashes a flurry of punches. Rick narrowly evades them, but when he's distracted, Braun sneaks up behind him, ready to deliver a clean hit. In a moment of quick thinking, Rick activates his air cushion spell, redirecting the blow and demonstrating instant spell casting a feat that impresses even Braun, who struggles to do the same without an incantation. Rick credits his success to the rigorous training he received from Alice and Met. They confirm how hard Rick worked, recalling an incident where he accidentally evaporated himself while practicing. With renewed resolve, Rick charges at Braun again, but Braun creates a shockwave to deter him. Undeterred, Rick circles around to land a flowing strike, only to be blocked. The force of Braun's counter sends him flying, but he uses the rubble to rebound and charges back. The crowd gasps as Braun prepares for a hurricane punch. Rick jumps to avoid it, but finds himself vulnerable in midair. As Braun strikes again, Rick uses air cushion to maneuver himself out of danger and launches an air shot at Braun, only for the dust to settle and reveal that Braun remains mostly unharmed. Before the fight resumes, Braun takes a moment to commend Rick on how much he's grown over the 2 years they've known each other. He acknowledges the effectiveness of the training, but emphasizes that Rick's mental fortitude was key to his progress. Rick feels honored by Braun's words, recognizing that they hold the weight of a master's respect. In a vulnerable moment, Rick reveals what he learned from Met and Alice about Braun's dream of facing an equal opponent. Braun brushes off the term dream, stating it's more of a desire for a fair fight. Nonetheless, Rick vows to show his gratitude for Braun's passion and commitment in training him, promising to fight with utmost respect. With a smile, Braun shares that he feels fortunate to have met Rick. He decides it's time to share the history of the Orcan Fist. He recalls being different as a child, stronger and smarter than the other orcs, which isolated him further. In his attempts to teach his brethren, he inadvertently elevated himself to a godlike status, intensifying his loneliness. One fateful day, during a heavy storm, Braun was away from his pack, and when he returned, he found that every member had perished. Rather than grief, he felt an unsettling emptiness, realizing the depth of his solitude. Later, while reading by the fire after a successful hunt, a man suddenly leaps from the bushes to attack Bronn, thinking he's an ordinary orc. Surprised by Bronn's agility and intellect, the man finds him fascinating and instead proposes a conversation. As they talk, Bronn shares his life story and the loneliness that comes with his capabilities. The man empathizes, revealing his own unfulfilled dream. And Bronn listens intently as the man mentions once fighting alongside a hero named Yamada. The tension between Rick and Bronn continues to build as both fighters prepare for what could be the match of a lifetime, each motivated by their respective dreams and desires. The crowd waits with bated breath, eager to see how the battle unfolds, knowing it could change the course of their lives forever. In this age, legends weave through the fabric of reality, and Bronn reveals to Rick that he once read about the legendary hero Yamato, whose story dates back 200 years. The man sitting before him, however, takes pride in being the very author of those tales, and he reveals his ambition to defeat Kaiser Alpia. This shared goal forms the foundation of their bond, and together they create the Orichalcum Fist Party, drawing in strong allies with unique abilities. Yet, despite their combined strength, Bronn longs for a true fistfight with someone who can challenge him, which leads him to devise an intense training regimen. Meh, however, quickly shoots it down, knowing no one could survive such rigorous training. In that moment, Rick reflects on his own journey, realizing that while he is trained in magic and technique, what Bronn truly craves is an old-fashioned brawl. Remembering the orc tradition of the quarter thumbs up, which signifies a commitment to an all-out fistfight, Rick decides to honor Bronn's dream. He extends his hand for the gesture, shocking Bronn. Internally, Rick feels conflicted. He knows he likely won't win, and he regrets the implications this has for his plans with Rynette. As Bronn reciprocates the gesture, both warriors unleash their full might, and the clash of their punches reverberates throughout the arena, threatening to shatter the barrier protecting the spectators. Mayette, sensing the impending chaos, calls upon Alice to help manage the magic, and they teleport the audience to safety, leaving only Kerwin behind, confident in his ability to handle any fallout. With the arena clear, Rick and Bronn's battle escalates into a fierce exchange of blows. Rick is aware that while he may land more punches, the sheer power behind Bronn's strikes is overwhelming. After a flurry of exchanges, Rick gets sent crashing into a wall, a move that devastates a section of the stadium. He briefly considers surrender, believing he's given it his all, but the fire within him refuses to extinguish. As he struggles to rise, Rick recalls his training and charges at Bronn again, only to be met with another counterattack. The fight intensifies, and Rick finds himself losing ground, yet the thought of giving up is not an option. He continues to push forward, connecting with Bronn, who revels in the thrill of the fight. However, both fighters are nearing exhaustion. They realize the next hit will likely determine the outcome, prompting them to gather every ounce of strength for one final headbutt. The aftermath of their clash sends shockwaves across the arena, leaving both bloodied but still standing. Rick laughs, acknowledging Bronn's strength, even as he collapses, feeling he has fought valiantly despite the odds. In the aftermath, Rick wakes up in a hospital room, the champion's belt resting on his chest and Rynette by his side. After 3 days of rest, Rick learns that Bronn, too, considers him the true victor of their match, despite the technicalities of the bout. This recognition fills Rick with pride, but he remains humble, noting Bronn's overwhelming strength and ability to keep going long after he himself could. As they discuss the belt, Bronn reveals his appreciation for the support from Rick's friends, though Rick was oblivious to their secret training efforts. It's a surprising revelation, but one that deepens his understanding of the bonds they share. As the party prepares to leave, Rick discovers he packed more food than expected, and the journey home could take weeks. However, Mayet uses magic to enhance their horse, speeding up their travel significantly. Just as Rick is about to set off, Rynette inquires about their hot spring trip. Flustered, Rick insists he can't accept such a reward, believing he hasn't truly earned it. Mayet, ever the strategist, proposes a race back to the castle. If Rick wins, he gets to go on the trip with Rynette. If he loses, he faces a grueling 100 times the training. Rick tries to negotiate the terms, but quickly finds himself in a race against Bronn and Mayet, spurred by his desire to take Rynette to the hot springs and avoid an exhausting training regimen. With adrenaline surging, he sprints after them, knowing this journey is just the beginning of many adventures to come. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more epic content. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't miss out on the next video. There's always more fun, surprises, and challenges ahead. Until next time, stay awesome and keep exploring.